I spent 20 years as a highway patrolman, and let me tell you, I've seen some things that'd keep most folks awake at night. High-speed chases, shootouts, brushes with death, you name it. But nothing comes close to what went down in the summer of 2018. It was one of those late-night shifts when the world feels unnervingly quiet, every creak and shadow amplified by the stillness. Most nights, I'd deal with the usual, speeders, drunks, and the occasional lost driver. That night seemed no different, at least, at first. I was parked near mile marker 62, radar gun resting in my lap, a thermos of lukewarm coffee on the dash. The radio buzzed with the familiar hum of routine reports. Just as I was draining the last of my coffee, dispatch chimed in with something strange. Any available units near Route 18, we have a 10 to 90. I frowned. In all my years, I'd never heard that code. Dispatch, this is Unit 504. Can you clarify? What's a 10 to 90? Silence. Dispatch, come again. The only reply was static. My patrol car's computer lit up with a set of coordinates, an isolated spot off the highway, surrounded by dense woods. Something about it didn't sit right. I reached for the radio again, this time paging my supervisor. Hey, Sarge, dispatch sent me something about a 10 to 90 with coordinates. What's the play here? His response was clipped, almost dismissive. Forget it. That wasn't meant for you. Wait, what? They sent it directly to me, coordinates and everything. Let it go, 504. Stay on your route. End of discussion. Orders were orders, but the unease lingered. Shaking it off, I went back to the usual routine, writing tickets and running plates. By the time 3 a.m. rolled around, fatigue had hit me like a freight train. I pulled into a small donut shop off the highway, hoping sugar and caffeine would do the trick. The place was a dive, a fading neon sign buzzed above a door that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. Inside, a man stood behind the counter. He was pale, so pale he almost glowed under the flickering fluorescent lights. His fingers were unnaturally long, and the way he moved, stiff and deliberate, made my stomach turn. "What'll it be?" he rasped, his voice as dry as rustling leaves. "Coffee." "And a couple of glazed," I muttered, trying not to stare. He slid my order across the counter in silence, his cold, unblinking eyes fixed on mine like he was trying to memorize my face. "Long night?" he asked, a faint, unsettling smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah. Graveyard shift. Never gets any easier." He let out a low, gravelly chuckle that made my skin crawl. "Be careful out there. You never know what might be lurking in the dark." I grabbed my bag and bolted for the door, the bell jingling sharply behind me. My pulse was racing by the time I slid into my car. Then, the radio crackled. "Help me." The voice was faint, warped, but undeniably human. I froze, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Dispatch, this is Unit 504. Did someone just broadcast a distress call?" Silence. I tried again, this time to my supervisor. Nothing. The silence wasn't just on the radio, it was in the air around me, an oppressive stillness that pressed against my chest like a heavy weight. Against every ounce of common sense, I punched the coordinates into my GPS and started driving. The route took me off the main highway, deeper into the forest. The road narrowed with every mile until it was nothing but a rough dirt path. My headlights barely cut through the dense darkness ahead. The trees loomed like skeletal sentinels, their gnarled branches twisting together to blot out the moonlight. When the GPS finally announced I'd arrived, I was surrounded by absolute nothingness. No houses, no lights, just endless woods. I stepped out of the car, gripping my flashlight with one hand and keeping my other near my holstered gun. The silence was suffocating. No insects. No wind. Not even the sound of my boots on the dirt seemed to carry. I clicked the radio again, my voice trembling. "Dispatch, this is 504. I'm at the coordinates. What's the situation?" "Static." I stepped further into the darkness, every step feeling heavier than the last. The air was thick, almost syrupy, and the beam of my flashlight barely pierced the inky blackness. Then, behind me, a twig snapped. I spun around so fast I nearly lost my footing. The flashlight's beam darted across the trees, catching shadows that seemed to dance and shift. "Who's there?" I barked, unholstering my gun. My voice sounded small, swallowed by the dark. The radio crackled. "Help me." This time, the voice was deafening, as though it was coming from inside my head, clawing at my brain. I dropped the radio, clutching my ears, but the sound didn't stop, it grew louder, more desperate. Before I could react, something heavy slammed into the back of my head, and everything went dark. I woke up to the sting of cold metal against my wrists and the ache of my body bound tight against a tree. My head throbbed, and the air reeked of wet earth, rotting wood, and something metallic, blood. Before me stood three figures, their faces obscured by dark, hooded robes. Their shapes wavered, almost as though they were flickering in and out of reality. Their whispers were guttural and harsh, like voices dragged through gravel. One of them stepped closer, the shadow of their hood revealing nothing but blackness beneath. "Why did you come here?" I got a distress call." "Someone needed help," I stammered, my voice cracking. The figure tilted its head, unnaturally slow. "Liar. You were warned." The whispers grew louder, surrounding me, echoing from every direction. "I was just doing my job." I pleaded. "Please, I don't even know what's going on here." The figure reached out, and I braced myself for a blow. Instead, they placed a cold, skeletal hand on my forehead. For a moment, my mind filled with blinding images, bodies hanging from trees, shadowy forms moving in the woods, and a blood-red sky that churned like boiling water. When the images stopped, the figure stepped back. "You've seen too much." The others nodded in agreement, their hooded heads bobbing like puppets. One of them drew a long, curved blade that gleamed faintly in the dim light. "Wait. Please." I screamed, struggling against the ropes. But instead of striking, the blade sliced through my bonds. I collapsed to the ground, my limbs weak and trembling. "Leave," the leader said. "And tell no one. If you return, you will not leave again." I stumbled to my feet, clutching my aching head. As I backed away, more figures began to emerge from the trees. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Their faces were pale, featureless, like blank masks, and their voices rose in unison. "Leave." I didn't wait to be told again. I bolted toward my car, the chorus of voices following me like a wave. The headlights flared to life, and I tore out of there, gravel spraying under my tires. The next day, I went straight to my supervisor. I told him everything. Every word. Every detail. He sat there, arms crossed, his face hard as stone. "You've been overworked," he said flatly. Take some leave, get some rest. Overworked? Sarge, there were people out there. Things out there. He stood up, leaning in close. Drop it, 504. That's an order. And just like that, it was swept under the rug. For years, I tried to forget. But the nightmares never stopped. And then, last month, the old patrol radio I kept as a memento crackled to life. Help me, the voice whispered. At first, I thought I imagined it. But it kept happening, night after night. And last night, for the first time, it said my name. So tonight, I've made my decision. I'm going back. I don't know what I'll find, or if I'll make it out this time. But I have to know the truth. If you're reading this, and you don't hear from me again, stay far, far away from Route 18.